Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a new ECPM webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the migration policy at the EU level, specifically the new proposals of the European Commission and how the different countries are reacting. We have here with us today three people involved in these issues, very passionate about them and ready to speak about the complex aspects surrounding them. First, I'd like to introduce Joel Fordivan, a long-standing member of Dutch Parliament from the Christian Union Party. He used to be a development aid worker. He worked for the United Nations and Dorcas Aid. And in the Dutch Parliament, he focuses a lot of his efforts on the issues of asylum, immigration, and foreign affairs. Secondly, we have with us Ladislav Ilčić. He's the president of the Hrast party, the Sovereignist Party in Croatia, and future member of European Parliament starting next year. He's a former member of the Croatian Parliament, and he and his party have been quite vocal about migration issues since Croatia is connected to the Mediterranean through the Adriatic Sea and has seen an influx of migrants. Our third speaker is Karin Hapen. She's chairwoman of Bunisse, Germany. She lived and worked as an engineer in Yemen for a few years. Her son was born there. And while she lived there, she learned the language. She was fully part of her neighborhood and her community. Most recently, she traveled to Jordan in 2017, and in Syria and in Lebanon in 2019, last year, where she's involved in supporting local churches in their various outreach activities. The Bunisse is a strong supporter of the democratic self-administration in northeast Syria, as a young government structure made up of all ethnic and religious groups in the area. Thank you all for being here. Before we dive into our debate and the questions we have prepared for you, allow me to set the context a bit and to define the terms. So for the purpose of this discussion, we will use the terms refugee and asylum seeker interchangeably to mean the same thing, namely a person who has fled their own country because they are at risk of serious human rights violations and persecution there. The risks to their safety and life were so great that they felt they had no choice but to leave and seek safety outside their country because their own government cannot or will not protect them from these dangers. This is the Amnesty International definition. So an asylum seeker has already applied for protection, while the refugee is already granted one. That is the difference between the two terms. The broader term migrant will be used to describe a person who is generally on the move or displaced for various reasons. It can be economic, social, it can be danger as well. They're in danger for their life. But a migrant has not been granted yet a protected status of refugee. Right? So those are the different terms and the differences between them. Now, this latest migration policy proposal comes as a response to the devastating Moria campfire that left approximately 12,000 refugees displaced on the island of Lesbos in Greece. Before this, the last time we discussed a migration policy at EU level was in 2015 at the height of the refugee crisis. At that time, the EU leaders were bitterly divided. Frontline coast countries like Greece, Malta, Italy were being overwhelmed by the waves of people arriving on their shores, while Central European countries like Hungary, Austria, and Poland refused a compulsory redistribution of the migrants that were arriving. So that left the EU without a comprehensive policy. This time, the Commission hopes to be able to bridge those divisions and make everyone happy. Here are the main takeaways from the present migration policy proposal called the new Pact for Migration and Asylum. First of all, it is proposed that the EU external border procedures become more efficient. There's talk about introducing a pre-entry screening in case of search and rescue operations, including fingerprinting. That's already being done. But on top of that, there will be a health and security check. So this way, decisions can be made very quickly, whether to allow the individual in or not. The second major proposal or point in the proposal is a new solidarity and responsibility mechanism. This time, the Commission avoided the deadlock over redistribution and quotas from 2015, and instead is offering the member states opportunities to contribute in a more flexible way. They can either continue to take in migrants, refugees, if the member states accept asylum seekers on their territory, they receive EU funding. Or if they choose not to do this, they can take responsibility for the return procedures. So returning migrants to their countries of origin, especially those that they had their asylum application rejected. So this is the term is called return sponsorships. So they can contribute with either money or personnel to take care of the returns. And then a third way that they can contribute is, or show solidarity, is through different kinds of operational support. Another new thing in this proposal is the appointment of a return coordinator. And he is, or she, this new appointment will be created because out of roughly 370,000 applicants that are rejected every year, only about a third are actually sent back or taken back. So in order to make this process more efficient, the proposal is asking for the appointment of a return coordinator. Another detail would be the setting up of an independent monitoring mechanism that the fundamental rights of the asylum seekers are being protected, are being respected while their application is in process, whether it's being granted or rejected. Now, a quick mention before we go to questions about the member states' reaction to this new pact. The interior ministers of all member states met last week to discuss the new proposal. And although nobody rejected it firsthand, the reactions fell along the same lines as before, meaning Central European countries fear they will have to take in asylum seekers anyway. And the coastline countries do not see it as real solidarity if not all member states take people in. So a second round of negotiations is coming up in a couple of weeks, and the European Parliament will also weigh in later in the year or next year. Now, given this background information, let's dive in. Let's begin with you, Ladislav. You and your party, Hrast, in Croatia, have been against imposing refugee redistribution in the past. Are you more comfortable with the new European Commission's provisions regarding solidarity and the alternative options that they're presenting?
Yes, in general, we think that the progress of European politics goes in a better, more realistic way. But firstly, I would like to say the basics. So we try to promote Christian approach to politics and this love. So when we have a person who is in need, so this Christian principle that we live for another human being, that we love, that this compassion, this solidarity is the basic principle. So when we have really refugees as you said, whose life is in danger and who flee from this danger, then this Christian principle is the first thing what we shall do. And I have to mention also that in Croatia we have a lot of experience with refugees, because in early 90s, when we had Serb aggression to Croatia, we had a lot of refugees from eastern part of Croatia, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, in my home. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, so we are quite a big family. Were with my parents, so we were 8. But anyway, we received 7 young refugees, 7 teenagers who lived for 2 years in our home and went to school in my town, and so we had have this experience. But I think that we have to be aware that there are people who want to misuse this Christian love, and who are actually not refugees. And I'm glad that I can notice that there are a big improvement in wording, because in 2015 all the media spoke just about refugees, and we know that from this southern road who went through Croatia, a lot of these people were not refugees; they were really economic migrants. And my friends from my party were in Velika Kladuša. It's a big camp in Bosnia and Herzegovina on the border with Croatia, and they spoke with a lot of migrants there. And we have to know that agents who organize their trip, we could call them smugglers. When they motivate people from this poor country, they use just simple sentences like, "Go to Germany, you will get a lot of money. I won't even have to work." So we must be aware that there is a spectrum from refugees to economic migrants with different interests. So in general, when we want to help people, and we really want to help people, we must be very precise, because people who come from these countries as migrants, and if we want to help them economically, then we must put ourselves question: are they really a group who is a most vulnerable people? Maybe in their country there are old people who need much more help than this young. Through Croatia, we saw these migrants. Most of them were young men from 20 to 45 years. So we must put this question: is this the most vulnerable group we want to help? So back to your question. In general, we were not supporters of Angela Merkel's Willkommen or welcome. We think that problems should be solved on the ground. So if there is a war in a certain country, we have to do everything we can to bring peace there. Then we have to motivate the neighbor countries to help refugees there. What happened in Lebanon in 2017 with, I think, 2 or 3 million people in camps, which were stopped receiving food for them. Then what is very important, that we want to live in a legal state. So if Croatian citizens must have IDs or passports, so must migrants, and we want our borders to be respected. So in general, we want to help. I think that's enough for my introduction. Of course, in Europe, maybe for the end of my introduction, and I hope I will have opportunity to speak more about this pact. But in general, certainly we in Europe are those men with 2 dresses from the gospel, and we are really obliged, and we want to give one of these dresses. We want to help poor people, but we have to do it very clever way. So that's my general attitude, and I will say more after this introduction of other speakers about this pact.
So then to sum up, you feel that the new proposal is going in the right direction? Are you
I'm not completely satisfied. I don't know if European Commission is ready to face one of very important thing, and these are borders. It's logically, it's if you have soft borders and migrants know that there are soft borders, you will have more attempts to illegal passing for illegal passing of migrants. So as stricter as how they say solid borders you have, you will have the number of illegal passing will decrease. So I don't know if European Commission is up to now ready to face this problem and to negotiate this problem, because a crucial problem and crucial difference among countries when you mention Austria or Poland or Hungary and, for example, Germany, the crucial difference is about this attitude to borders.
I see. Well, thank you. So then, Karin, what do you think is this flexible solidarity maybe a disincentive for countries to take in refugees if they can just sponsor returns or help with operations?
I don't know if this is really a disincentive for countries to take in refugees, because they have their attitude, they have their reasons, they have their position for several years now already, and the positions were so opposing and almost even hostile between the countries in the EU on this topic, so that we need a solution. And I think this way now, what the Commission proposes can help to overcome this splitting also in Europe. From our Judeo-Christian background, we are called upon to share our bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into our house when we see someone needy, to cover him and so on. We know that, and we want to meet this standard of humanity. And this was also recently called by Pope Francis in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti. But of course, the Church and also these commandments cannot rule over politics. And as ECPM, we pursue a relational concept for society based on this love commandment of Jesus. But here, we must also ask about the relations between the member states in the EU, which have been really burdened by this migration topic. And migration is in the competence of the EU member states, as we all know, and it must therefore remain the responsibility of the member states and their governments to decide whether and how many refugees they take in. And in order to answer the question of a negative or positive incentive for taking in refugees, we must first look inside the society to see what the conditions for admission of foreigners and refugees or migrants are, and how integration can succeed. And we have learned in Western Europe that it is not enough to get immigrants and guest workers into vocational trainings or into work. Basically, we face major barriers that refugees and immigrants have to overcome in society. This is language, culture, and religion. And language acceptance of our culture and tolerance of other religions are, in a way, decisive preconditions for integration also in our society and into our economy. And in order to overcome these barriers and to become a part of a society, immigrants need relationship with the natives. And neither language or cultural differences are sufficiently learned in language or integration courses provided by governmental authority. Both need contact and relationship with natives. And if these relationships do not develop, the immigrants remain strangers and do not become part of the societies. And this is often what we have in these parallel societies in Western Europe. And unfortunately, these examples are not very encouraging for some of the Eastern European countries. And we also have this in many large cities in Germany. And what we have to consider is also that the Eastern European countries do not really have the same resources and social standards in their countries, which we have in Western Europe. Such a relational-oriented approach to shaping our society gives us also practical guidelines for migration policy. And so the capacity of a society to integrate immigrants is actually measured by the extent to which the local population enters into relationship with migrants. And politicians can promote this, but they cannot demand or force the locals to do so. For the reception of refugees and immigrants, the policy of a country must also take into account the willingness of the population and how state institutions can promote and support this willingness. Churches in particular can give good examples and offer rooms for refugees where they can find contacts and relationships with locals, as Ladislav also was talking about. And on the other hand, it is of little help if churches or even politics quote Jesus' commandment of love as a justification or as a demand for unlimited acceptance of refugees. And Pope Francis wrote in this new encyclical, Europe, supported by its great and cultural religious heritage, has the means to defend the centrality of the person and to find the right balance in its twofold moral duty to protect the rights of its own citizens and to guarantee the care and reception of migrants. And in a relational thinking, governments must balance this tension between the locals and foreigners. But more pressure will not change the mindsets of governments or the hearts of people. Love is either given voluntarily or it is compulsion. The forced solidarity of the society will fail, as we realized during the last years already, and no refugee wants to go to a country that is forced to accept him or her. So that is why I believe that after years of hardened positions on distribution quotas and so on, with this option of flexible solidarity in the new Migration Pact, we have a viable way of jointly meeting the challenge of migration in Europe. And this is actually a progress. We should rather ask the question in reverse, what could be positive incentives for countries to accept refugees? How could the EU support them? And there I see a free decision of the member states as a very important factor to promote migration policy and not to provoke an attitude which is even more defending it or defeating it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Let me turn to you, Mr. Fordivan. How do you make sure that? How do we make sure as EU, as a society, that Moria doesn't happen again? How do we humanize our migration policies more? The Commission says that that's what they're trying to do with this new pact. But I don't know, in your opinion, do you think they are achieving that or they have achieved that?
Well, at the moment, it's obvious that it's a disgrace, a big disgrace for human culture and human values that we endure the big humanitarian crisis on Lesbos and other countries. I've traveled to Lesbos a couple of times. And even now they're trying to set up this new camp. Just got new pictures in after the rain, and it's really a disgrace. It's inhuman. It's unacceptable that the European countries on their continent tolerate this humanitarian crisis. So indeed, we as the Netherlands, and I know the Germans, have been very empathetic on bringing people from the islands to Germany, and we also just got an agreement with our coalition government to bring some of them from Lesbos also to the Netherlands. We've also supported Greece in setting up hostels for unaccompanied minors in Greece itself. Hopefully this will be open today. But again, it's not the answer, it's not the solution, it's only temporarily lifting of the crisis there. And that's the good thing about the Migration Pact and the proposal that it's trying to present a structural solution and solidarity within Europe, which we couldn't achieve the last. I'm a member of Parliament now for 14 years, working on this issue for 14 years. So it's been impossible to get an agreement on solidarity concerning taking care of refugees in Europe. So this is, I hope, not old wine in new baskets, if you say it like that in English. I think there are good elements in it. It's a challenge to get it implemented, but there are options for countries to choose from. So it tries to embrace solidarity on different levels. So that's a challenge also for the Eastern European countries, the Visegrad countries, to be involved and not say, well, we'll skip this time. I know it's a difficult situation in Eastern Europe or Central Europe countries where they already receive refugees, and the flow goes through those countries if they move on northwards. But hopefully this is an opportunity for the Visegrad countries as well to join in one way or another. Where I see the challenges in the implementation is, of course, how do we shape the return sponsorship? Do people who don't want to accept taking on refugees are willing to take their responsibility then for the returnees? And of course, directly connected with this is if people are not accepted as a refugee, or they're not having a high chance of getting a refugee status, what do we do with them? Are we put them in camps along the border of Europe, in Italy and Greece? Are we going to safeguard these camps? Who's going to take care of these camps? What are the rules? Are they allowed to go out? How long can we let them stay in these camps? Who's going to take care of the food and all the facilities they need? So that's our big question. Also about, of course, the solidarity. Is it a forced solidarity? What happens if there is an emergency crisis and people come into Europe on a mass scale? There are options in the Migration Pact that says, if that's the case, then we all need to accept refugees coming in. So I wonder how that will be implemented also by the Visegrad countries and received by them. So there are quite some challenges and things to take care of. For example, the search and rescue activities on the sea, on the Mediterranean Sea. It says that if the people are picked up at the sea, they should be transported directly to the member states. So that is another approach than the general approach that they propose now, that to make a selection on the pre-entry or the pre-entry screening to see if people are having a high chance of getting refugee status or not. So we, as the Netherlands, highly appreciate that format, to do a pre-entry screening and take in people and do the final selection on the refugee status, because we think it's still a sovereign responsibility for member states to make that choice. But to have a pre-entry screening, that could help a lot by dividing on a solidarity base refugees over Europe. So yes, we are positive. Our government is, with even the liberals in the government, they are lightly positive. But I think we do support in general the pact, but there are still some tough questions to answer as it's concerned the implementation.
Excuse me, can I jump in for a second,
Yes, please.
Adriana? Mr. Fordivan, I really appreciate your goodwill, and it's I think everybody can see your goodwill and compassion to help these people. And I would say from my side the same. So my question would be, can we make this process more human if we don't control this process? So that's my general question. And why I asking this? You know, according to some research, there are 500 million people who would like tomorrow from this poor country who would like to start tomorrow their journey to Europe if they could. You know, so there is a really a lot of people, and if they really start, when they start this journey, which is not human. We have to face this, you know, and if we cannot accept them, then the problems will be bigger and bigger, you know. So I really wonder how we can, you know, and I would really divide here refugees, you know, when there is a fire, when there is a war, then they have no time to think about it, you know. They will start, and we have to help them. That's without any question, you know. But when we speak about legal economic migrants, you know, if we cannot control this kind of numbers, we have to try to solve this problem on the ground. And you know, what motivates me to ask this question about this controlling the process, you know, because European Union, according to new proposal, is prepared to give 10,000 euro for each migrant, you know. And for example, in Croatia, there is very, how they say, a lot of people are engaged in Mary's Meals. I don't know if you know this humanitarian organization. I organize every year a concert here. You know, we have built a kitchen in one school in Benin, you know. And why I'm telling this, because 20 to 30 euro is enough for one child to get one hot meal in every day during 1 year. So during 1 year, altogether, 20 to 30 euro is enough. And for example, the number of children in these schools is increasing for 20 or 30% because they get meal there. You know, for this 10,000 euro, you can bring a hot meal to 500 children in very poor part of the world, you know. So I cannot.
Yeah.
So this is not very good balance, you know. We shall spend a lot of money on migrants, and maybe we could help on another way to help people on the ground. So back to my question. About this relation you have experience about controlling process and really making this process human.
Yes, if I may, Adriana, thank you, Ladislav, for your question. And I agree. It's also working on the development of countries where people flee from migrants. And that's the third level that the Migrant Pact is asking attention for. How can we prevent, especially youngsters, to flee from their countries and give them perspective and hope in their own countries? So that's why we, as the Netherlands, try to push, and I know the Germans were trying to get this Marshall Plan going for taking care of refugees in their own country. It didn't fly in the European Union, and every member state is trying to invent the wheel by themselves. It's too bad. But you're right, we should work on more structural solutions, trying to give them hope in the countries where they are from. At the same time, I still believe that we should do both. So even if you invest, that's the curve that it's making. If you invest in countries, you will see that people get more money and they try to flee. It is unless further developments will happen in those countries that people will stay. So we should be prepared to have this asylum seekers system in Europe to control the influx that we didn't control in 2015. I was at the border of Macedonia, Greece, where 7,000 people entered per day. And we didn't know what to do or who to register. They just flee into Europe. So that's what we should prevent at all times. That's why I think this is one solution. But you're right, we should work on more structural. And of course, I know about the 500 million. I also know about the UNHCR resettlement program, which says there's about 1.3 million of the most vulnerable people that should be resettled to other countries at this moment. And I think if you look at that amount, it is acceptable for the rich countries, the Western countries, to let them in. Of course, the 500 million is totally not foreseeable, but the 1.3, the most vulnerable. And that's why we also push to try to get our amount of resettlement quota for the UNHCR higher than we have at this moment. So to be open for the most vulnerable, as the Bible tells us, to take care of the most vulnerable, and maybe be sharper on the influx in Europe. That's the mix we are looking at.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the reaction. Yes, I believe the Commission is anticipating some of these problems, and I mean that's why the negotiations, that's why the ministers are talking, and hopefully in its final form, the policy will account for all of this. But indeed, it's a good step towards having something comprehensive and towards a structure, like Mr. Fordivan said, towards a structure. I have a question for maybe both Karin and Ladislav. What is your opinion on the processes that are described in this new policy, and the way that migration would be managed? So the vetting, the extra pre-entry screening, what do you think of the monitoring body that they are, creating, the return policy? Please share any thoughts you have on these processes. Karin?
You want me to start? Okay.
Sure.
I believe that this monitoring and controls and the whole procedure is really necessary to ensure that the asylum procedure is running smoothly, and to really reduce irregular migration with its human suffering and economic costs for the people coming over the Mediterranean. And actually, right now, about 2/3, I think, are not meeting the conditions for asylum. And my biggest doubts relate on this whole process, which is described in the new Migration Pact, relates to the return policy, because we know how difficult deportations are. This can possibly be organized more efficiently with asylum procedures at the external borders, but nevertheless, refugees who have left everything behind and have come across the Mediterranean will not go back voluntarily. In Germany, many people try to flee and hide, are warned by NGOs, protected from the police, resist when they are picked up and on the plane. And this is understandable, actually. And deportations are indeed inhuman action. That is why it is necessary, I think, to communicate through clear regulations what the reasons for asylum are, and that immigration to Europe is separated from this if it is for economic reasons and not possible through an asylum procedure. Of course, what we heard already from Mr. Fordivan, we have to do what we can to prevent young people, mainly young people, to flee their society and their country. But of course, our possibilities are also limited, because we are actually not able to change structures which are in Africa or wherever caused by repressive regimes and governments. So people will also always have reasons to flee, also for economical issues. What I cannot find ethically justifiable is to arrange immigration, as one part of the new migration pact is, along the lines of the US and Canada and Australia under the heading attracting the talent we need. This is a targeted way of attracting expensive trained workers from poorer countries. We know the impact of EU free movement already from poorer countries. We know about torn families, elderly people, and of orphans staying behind. We have to realize that when people emigrate to Europe, the families and communities in their place of origin lose their strongest members with the most initiative and power. And this is what we have to realize. And the most needy will stay there. It may be a good idea to enable young people from Africa or wherever to get a good education or to study in Europe, to support them also for maybe a return to their country. But recruiting skilled labor force is bleeding the countries out, and even more, we are enriching ourselves at their expense. So this is, I think, a part of the migration pact from a Christian and ethical view we cannot support. Europe has we have caused our own shortage of skilled workers with a one-sided, individualistic and materialistic focus on economy, and we have too few children. This shortage cannot be filled by immigration, but needs a long-term policy in favor for families and children in Europe. And we need as we always say in ECPM, a relational economy, which is not only based on growth and profit maximization, to reduce the causes which make the rich richer and the poor poorer, and so cause a main issue for migration and people in poorer countries to flee from there. So also a financial system which has to find other ways to support an economical society that would really be a help for Africa and other regions, most to give young people prospects and prevent their migration. So these are my main concerns about the Migration Pact.
Thank you.
If I can add?
Yes, Ladislav, please go ahead.
So concerning this new pact, new proposal of European Commission, we are glad that European Union gave up imposing quotas. As Karin said in her introduction, it must be based on voluntary basis, because we have in contra effect if it is not so. We welcome more strict identification and connecting among police departments, and we welcome help of commissioner who could help speed up all this process and this sending back. All people said that there is more space for sending more people back to their home countries and things like this. But as I said, I think that we need more control on this process. For example, in Croatia, we have a lot of migrants who, we have really long borders with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it's very difficult borders. It's mountains and woods and so. And we have a lot of illegal migrants who try to pass Croatia and go to Slovenia, Austria, Germany, and so. And our police department, what they say, they catch them and they bring them to Bosnia, and then they wait in Bosnia for another week or two, and then they try again, And from our perspective, these people are really not the most vulnerable group. So, for example, in the world, I think we have almost 10,000 or something like this. People who die every day because of hunger or consequences of hunger. And we can say in Croatia, and we see these people, migrants, they are not among them. So they are not starving, so there are really people in the world who are in much bigger need than this who are migrants. I don't want to be too generally. Of course, among migrants there are also dramatic cases, and we have to help them. But back to the pact. So what we need is more control, more negotiation about our attitude to borders, what we think, and what we should, what European Union should consider their borders, if they're soft or they should not be soft as they are now.
Well, the processes that are proposed seem to address some of these concerns that you have. So, yeah, let's hope that during the negotiations they can turn into policy. We only have a little bit time left, and I just wanted to get Mr. Fordivan's opinion on the NGOs and what NGOs, what regular people can do. I know you work in Parliament, but you've worked in an NGO before, and you are connected to NGOs that are active in immigration and asylum. So your take on this would be greatly appreciated. What can NGOs and regular people do at the moment?
Well, at this moment, my neighbor lady, she went to Lesbos for 3 weeks to help out individually with an NGO. So I have deeply respect for her and for the other thousands of volunteers that help out with the NGOs and try to relieve some of the suffering that they endure at the moment. I know that they are also having boats trying to rescue people from the Mediterranean Sea. Well, that's another aspect that the Migration Act or Pact is also dealing with, the search and rescue. So I'm happy that the search and rescue is also in the Pact, because there lately, the last couple of years, there has been quite some struggles and fighting between the NGOs and Frontex, the European Frontier Border Control. So there was also a Dutch boat that the Dutch government was not very eager and happy with, because they picked up a lot of refugees, and then they were anticipating that these refugees would be sent to the Netherlands and not divided over Europe. So hopefully this pact will give also space to the NGOs to be involved in the implementation of the pact concerning search and rescues, concerning humanitarian aid. Yeah, I hope that, well, if people listening, what can they do? Yeah, they can support the NGOs that are active at the external borders of the EU, helping to relieve the suffering of the refugees at the moment. And hopefully we'll get a good structure, as Ladislav said. We should control our borders more effectively. So if the people are divided, we know for pretty much sure that they will be a refugee and not an asylum seeker. And that way we are able to control our borders better, and we can shape the Dublin Agreement, reshape it, that whenever people will still flee to our countries, we can say, well, go back to the external borders and apply there and do the pre-entry screening. If you are selected, then you're welcome to come, and then we enter you in our asylum seekers process. So that, I think, we all should want to have a better control of the influx of refugees as a big lessons of 2015.
Thank you for that. I'm checking Facebook to see if there are any questions from the audience. But if not, if any of you have any closing thoughts,
I would just add one sentence.
I think we could also maybe discuss a little bit, just maybe for a minute each. What is your opinion on the practice of smuggling and human trafficking And if the provisions in this new pact, do you think that prevents that in an efficient way? Vladislav, if you want to jump in and first start answering this question, and then Mr. Fordivan and then Karin.
So I think that it's dramatic question, smugglers, and so the fight against them must be dramatically better. And I hope this pact could help in this process. But I would, for the end, just add one sentence that migration are very complex questions. So migration influence on mentality, on politics, on cultural and social situation in each country, and we have to be aware of that there are people with different interests, no matter if that's religiously motivated or any other interests, and we must really control these processes. And so I think we as white people really have some burden from the past, because in the past really white men made not very beautiful things in these poor countries, so for example, we have a priest from Benin, and I asked him, do you have some gold or oil in Benin? And he said, fortunately not. He said, fortunately not. And I asked, why fortunately? And he said, if we had, there would be wars and things like this, and now we are just poor. So it was interesting that, because this instability, and white people really sometimes use these instabilities from Roman times, divide et impera, that they made some instability, wars and things like this to get some interest from this. So we really, from European Union, are people who should help and should find efficient way to help people who are really in need.
Thank you, Ladislav. Mr. Fordivan.
Yes, shortly. I think that we should fight the smugglers because they have bad intentions. They try to steal a lot of money from people who are very depending on them. And we should focus on a better regulation and control of the migrant streams, even for the people that want to study in Europe or that want to work temporarily in Europe. And that's also a part of the migrant pact, that they have regulations set up for legal migration. The second thing I just want to add quickly is if we see the faith of Christians that are trying to flee their countries because they are persecuted because of their faith, we see that they have an extra endurance if they flee, and they even have to pay more to the smugglers. They are having more risks, and even I heard stories of Christians are pushed out of the boats while they want to cross to Greece. So that makes me even more motivated to, with, for example, the resettlement quota from the UNHCR, to have a preference there for Christians and other religious minorities, to put them on the list as a priority for the resettlement quotas. Because I know if they flee their country, they probably flee to a next door neighbor Muslim country where the persecution can continue, even in the camps. I know they're in Turkey, they're not fleeing to the UNHCR camps, they're fleeing to the monasteries because they don't feel safe at the UNHCR camps. So we should pay extra attention to our brothers and sisters who are fleeing and persecuted and cannot be taken care of in the region.
Yeah, good point about that. You're right. There has been some news about that. Yeah. Karin, closing thoughts and addressing the smuggling, human trafficking aspect of it.
Yes, of course, it is a very evil issue that there will always be criminals who are exploiting the need of people, the need of people in economic difficulties, or even of persecuted people, as Mr. Fordivan just told us. And it is the necessity to defeat these smugglers, especially on the Mediterranean Sea, to protect the external border better, to discourage smugglers to bring, to take over refugees for a lot of money and taking them everything what they have. So this is also a humanitarian duty and obligation which we are facing to protect this borderline in order to discourage smugglers and criminals and to protect the people in need who want to come from these people and these criminal actions. So I can only agree with Mr. Fordivan. We have to find legal ways for immigration and to protect the external borders and to have efficient and clear regulations for asylum seekers that everybody knows for what reasons he can come in. And these ways we have to support also for refugees coming from Africa or from the Middle East and who are really the most vulnerable, that they have a chance to find asylum in Europe, and not only the strongest who manage to come over. And this is, my final statement.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your opinions, for your expertise. I really appreciate you all making the time to be with us. I'm grateful to the speakers. I'm very thankful to the audience online who is watching us. And this is an ongoing discussion. The pact is ambitious, and the proposals are good. They're going in the right direction from what I'm hearing from each one of our panelists. But of course, more work has to be done. And then, when it comes to implementing it, it's up to the member states to put these Christian values that we guide our lives by in practice. And to make sure that whether we accept them or return them to their home country, we do it in a humane way, in a charitable way. So definitely, I'm looking forward to seeing that happening in Europe. Yes, thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
We may not impress everyone. Some may even see us as insignificant, but the truth is, we are not here for power. We are here to make a difference. And that's often in the little things, small focus shifts, amendments that matter. Like I said, we are not here for power or might. We are here to empower faith, peace, love, life. We are here to give a voice to justice, to freedom, families, communities. We are here to stand up for what is right. In a time when people more and more distrust political institutions and their intentions, we believe that trust can be rebuilt. But not by a European Union that promises to be the solution for everything. We stand for an EU that facilitates, that finds solutions for key matters, and holds back where that's more appropriate. A European Union that acknowledges that that union was once built on a firm foundation of Christian principles and of Christian values, where people from minorities have the fundamental freedom to be different from the majority, respected and protected. We believe in an economy that works for people and the planet, because we aim to build a future that is full of hope, where people are empowered by initiative and ownership, where human dignity is not seen as optional, but inviolable, where healthy families are recognized as the basis for thriving societies. As different as we are, we know one thing. that we will always find each other in the same God, in the same faith. We are not here for power. We are here to be the voice of what is right. We are ECPM, the European Christian Political Movement.